Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Secrets of the Night Sky, Part 2. We are in the middle of having a conversation about the mazalot, the constellations, and the powers that are associated with them. And I just wanted to be mindful again, and that this class, the learning for this week, is dedicated to the Torah Diamond Center donor by Jack and Shella Sitt in honor of their children, Marilyn, Norma, Barry, and Allison Sitt. This particular conversation, I know what everyone's looking for. I know I've got people online who are watching this saying, well, Rabbi, where do you get to the cool stuff? I want to know when I could learn about my mazal and how that mazal, impacts me. I want to know my fortune and how that impacts my nature, my children, my grandchildren, whatever it is. When are you getting to the good stuff? And my answer is, all good things come to those who wait. This is a very complicated conversation, and and today is going to be like another introduction, and Bezrat Hashem, after we finish today, next week we'll start with one of the months. I'm not sure if we'll start in the month that we're in right now, or we'll start in Nisan and go through Nisan or Adar. We'll figure out what the best way to do it is. But this is a continuation from last week's conversation. We're talking about things that are very difficult. As Jews by nature are rationalists. If you look at the way our rabbis interpret the Torah, there's a lot of conversation about just understanding simple things like what's the intention, logical, don't give me mystical explanations, don't give me midrashic explanations. And while we do have a esoteric, mystical tradition, we still want to be grounded first in something that is tangible, something that is cerebral, something that is rational. So while I love Kabbalistic ideas, there's a reason why the Mekubalim say you should start learning this stuff until you're in your 40s, right? And there's a certain type of maturity, a certain type of sensitivity that you're supposed to have when you're dealing with this kind of subjects. So, for example, today, if you listen to the news, there was a young man named Brian Thompson, who was the CEO of United Healthcare. And he was in New York City, he's from Minnesota. He was walking into the Hilton Hotel, and he was shot and killed early this morning. So now, this is horrible, horrible news. Now, was his shooting something that could have been prevented? Meaning, had he known his astrological sign, if he was more in tune with how the stars were aligning with himself, could he have done something different? Right? Now, that's a good question. Meaning, if things are literally written in the stars, who says I can change them? Now, last week we said that there's something called En Mazal Yisrael, that the Jewish people have the power of breaking out their mazalot. And I want to double click into this concept, and on a more even more spiritual way. If you look at the first source over there, if you are listening to us online, the sources should be in the comment section. There's a link there that has all these sheets there as well. So we're in the part 2. So we're quoting the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, this is the code of Jewish law that every one of us is supposed to read. And he says as follows. He says, do not to do magic, necromancy, or divination, containing 19 sections. This is a whole section of Shulchan Aruch of not doing magic. And Halakha says as follows: we do not make inquiries to astrological seers, nor to their fates. Rabbi says you must be tamim tiyeh b'dachecha. He's quoting a verse in the Torah itself. Torah says you should be completely faithful to your God. Now, what does that mean? Now, can you go to a Mekubal, a Kabbalist, and ask him questions about your future or your past? And according to this halakha, he's saying you should not. Now, let me explain to you why. There is a great book called Faith and Folly in English. You could find it on Amazon. It was written in Hebrew originally about 30, 40 years ago by Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, Chacham Hillel. The Hebrew title was called Tamim Tiyeh, actually a description of this pasuk that we just quoted in this source over here. You must be wholehearted with the Lord your God. Tamim Tiyeh, Yim Hashem Elokecha. Now, God creates a world of infinite potential. Okay? Everything is possible in our world. You can do whatever you want to do. You can be whatever you want to be. However, there are certain limiting factors. So, for example, if your parents were both, astrophysicists, Okay, the likelihood is that you'd probably do much better in science and math. If your parents were both rabbinic scholars, the likelihood is that you probably have some kind of ability in religion that's greater than the people around you. But we all come from humble families, and we're survivors, and that's what most Jews were doing for so long, just trying to figure out how to survive. How do I make sure that I could pass this stuff on to the next generation? But and therefore, there's a certain limitation to what you're capable of. Do you have the ability of breaking out of your the confines of the family and the astrological stuff? The answer is yes. How do we do it? The mistake is saying, well, okay, let me go find out what my astrological sign is, and based on my astrological sign, I'll use that understanding as a guiding point for me to grow and develop myself. And we are rejecting this idea for several reasons. Number one is, why would you want to limit yourself to a natural astrological sign? You can be more than your astrological sign. You can become something much greater than whatever is defined for you. Just like you could break out of the family that you came from. You don't have to be someone that is tethered to your past. You can become something more than your past. Why would you want to rely on a natural science to define you? And therefore, when we talk about the Mikubalim as well, they may see things, and this is the way Chacham Hillel says it. There was an art of being able to go up into the spiritual realm, pull information out of that realm, and bring it down into this world without it being tainted. We no longer have that ability. No one alive today has the ability of reaching up for information into the spiritual realm, pulling it down to this world without it being tainted. And therefore, no matter what you hear from any spiritual guru, the information that they're getting has been somewhat corrupted. And therefore, you should never, ever fully give credence to anything you're hearing from anybody when it comes to spiritual matters. When it comes to basic things like what's the law, how do I apply the law, how do I better myself, that you can go to and get good advice. But when it comes to someone who has the ability of reaching out into a spiritual realm and pulling out information, know that information does not remain pure once it comes down to this world. Once you pull into this world, we have lost the art of preserving spiritual information from a spiritual realm, which is why we have something called Torah Sheba'al Peh. We have written laws, written ideas of spirituality that are not corruptible. But because these are ideas that have not yet been written down, new things you kind of want to get that information from, know that information is not 100% intact. It has been diluted with all kinds of other forces. And that's exactly what this halacha is. Halacha is that we do not, tamim tiyeh im Hashem lokecha, you have to have complete faith. Number one, that God loves you. And even if you're going through challenge and hardship, understand that challenge and hardship is a uniquely challenge to you that is designed to help you grow. I create all kinds of obstacles for my children, not because I hate them, it's because I love them. And the more the obstacles I create for them, which is the way we create obstacles as parents is by saying no, or if we're going to parlay, you do this for me and maybe I'll do this for you. But certainly a parent that says yes, I'm going to argue as a parent that truly does not love their child. That's a parent's way of getting rid of their children. I don't want to deal with you. Yes, take this, go, yeah. This no to a child is a boundary that helps them grow. Stop thinking you have to give everything to your children. You do not. You have no obligation. There's no chiyuv, no obligation at all to give everything your children ask for. As a matter of fact, the more boundaries you create for your kids, the stronger they will become. Okay? The tamim tiyeh is having trust in the process. So what does that look like, Rabbi? How do I trust the process? Well, and I've spoken about this before, if you don't have a picture in your mind's eye of what it means to grow as a human being, then there's no process, right? When things that are measured, okay, are things that can be managed. If you're not measuring your growth, there's no way to manage your growth. If there's no process in place for you to think about how you're developing yourself, how am I becoming more, then there's nothing to manage. You're just letting your mazal define you. And I'm all about empowering all of you to think more deeply about, well, who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? Don't let the mazal define it for you. Become more than your mazal. And this is what the Zohar says. I mean, look at number 2. The Zohar says that from the time the Torah was given to Israel, the Israelites were withdrawn from the rule of the stars and constellations. However, if one does not follow the ways of the Torah, he or she returns to be under the dominion of these natural influences. So you have the power of breaking out of the natural order of things. Well, what does that look like? Well, I'm not saying you have to become a very religious, pious person. Everyone's religiosity, their practice is uniquely their own. All I'm saying is that there has to be a process in place. Every one of you has to have something that they're working through, developing, growing, whatever that looks like. That's personal. I understand that. I respect that. I don't expect us to all look monolithic. We could all look differently, and that's totally fine. And for me, it's irrelevant where you are on the spiritual ladder. That's the mistake we make. We think, oh, well, in order for me to be religious, I have to fit in a particular kind of way. That's nonsense. The one thing that to me is super important is that there is a process for growth. What it looks like is different for all of us. I came from a place where there was a very different understanding of what spirituality looked like. It took me a long time to kind of like develop a deeper appreciation for what my unique spiritual journey was. And my journey is my own. Am I in control of where I end up at the end of the journey? No. If you'd have told me 26 years ago that I would be a rabbi at the Safra Synagogue, I would have laughed. A rabbi? I hate rabbis. I don't want to be a rabbi. You would have told me I would be working on college with collegiates, young professionals, that I would have married 233 couples over a short period of time. I would have laughed. That's not who I was. That's nothing to do with my journey. I have no control over where I ended up, but I took it upon myself to be more mindful of my story. I did not want to end up on the natural timeline of where I came from. If you look at your lives, okay, we understand. This is your parents, and you're going to go like this in your life, straight. It's a straight line. That's your mazal. Your mazal goes like this. But if you make one small little change, right, and instead of going this way, I make a change over here on my timeline, and now where I end up looks completely different. I'm no longer over here. I'm all the way up here. That's what it means to be a Jew. You have the power of breaking out of this and become something. You could end up someplace completely different.
So do we control our destiny on this?
I'll tell you, we don't. Well, you see, that's a complicated question because I don't control the results. I can control my actions. I don't know what your lives would have looked like had you made one small change. I know that we can control our destiny by not allowing our lives to unfold on the path that we're on. Had I not made my own personal choices, there's no way I would have had the children that I have right now. There's no way my wife would have married me. I would have married a completely different person. Everything about the people, like my influence, my circles, the things that I've done would have been a different person. I've changed, I altered my future. If you would have looked at my trajectory from where I started to where I was when I'm 20, and you would have looked at me as a 20, 21-year-old, you're like, okay, he's for sure going to end up over there. Right? Based on simple things. We could look at, okay, you could end up here. But I decided I wanted something more. And it came from a real deep look at the kind of values I had, the kind of values I wanted to leave into the next generation, a vision of a better version of myself, and then working really hard to become that version of me. And it came with a lot of learning, a lot of time, a lot of investing, a lot of boundaries, a lot of all sorts of things that led to the construction of whatever it is that I am right now. How I ended up here, I can tell you it was a series of steps. The things that opened up for me, I didn't have a choice in that. The world that I created for myself along that path changed, and therefore new vistas of opportunity opened up for me. That's all it is. If I leave things as is, the sun rises and it sets. Sunrise, sunset, that's what it means. It's a monotonous, march of time. But we know that the sign, the symbol for the Jewish people is what? The moon, not the sun. We're the nation of the moon, right? And so, which day of the month do we do Rosh Chodesh, right? Meaning, what phase of the moon do we do Rosh Chodesh? When do we bless the moon? When the moon is at its fullest, right? But there's the waxing and the waning of the moon. right? The Muslims, by the way, they have a crescent moon when the moon is beginning to emerge. And for us, it's about the totality of the moon. Why? Because when the moon is at its fullest, it is reflecting the sun. That's all it is. The moon has none of its own light. And therefore, it's a symbol for us that in order for us to become Jews, we have to become polished enough to reflect God's light into this world. It's not just me. If I don't create a space for godliness and spirituality in my life, then all I'm doing is reflecting me. And therefore, in that situation, all you are is an extension of your mazal, of the planets that surround you. But I'm saying you can become more. The Arizal in Likutei Torah says, during these months, the fetus develops in the mother's womb through the power of the 7 planets. For the blessed God gave into their hands to rule over all human attributes. Number 4, Ibn Ezra says, it is well attested that each nation and each city is linked to a star that advises it as to its fate. Israel, however, has a great fortune that it is God alone is its advisor. For Israel is God's portion. To become a Jew means that you break out of the mazal of nature and you can become something more than nature. In this week's Parshat Vayetzeh, we read about this famous imagery of Jacob's ladder, right? The angels coming up and coming down. Rosh Hashanah. This is a very awesome symbolism and imagery that it evokes, right? What is it about? Well, Rashi says that it's about the angels coming up and down represent different nations. Each angel has a nation that it oversees it. And he sees the angels going up in power and coming back down, coming up and down, up and down. But Rosh Hashanah means that the ladder was so high up that he sees the timeline is so long. There's going to be one angel, the Malach of Edom, right? That's the galut, the exile that you and I are in right now. And he says it doesn't look like it ever ends. And Hashem says, don't worry about it, it's going to come down too, right? So you and I are part of a cycle of history. Now, the one thing that God promises to Yaakov is that don't worry about it, you're going to be eternal. Don't worry about it, you're going to be a blessing unto the people. What does it mean to become a blessing unto the people? That the people on earth will be blessed through you. Let's just double click on that for a minute, okay? Well, let's look at history. Is that true? Right? Is there any correlation between having a large number of Jewish people in your nation and the success of that nation? Yes. Well, let's look at the last, let's look at 500 years ago. Look at Spain. Greatest example. Spain, majority, 90% of all Jews lived in Spain. In Europe at the time, okay? Powerhouse, okay? Spain owned more land than any other country in the world history, more than the Roman Empire. They say the sun never sets on Rome. It's not true. It never set on Spain. Mm-hmm. Everything on the New World, the Old World, Spain was massive, right? What happens in 1492? We exile all the Jews. What happens to the Spain? Slowly the economy begins to crumble until it comes to a dead halt. Where all the Jews move to? This new empire called the Ottoman Empire. There is a deep correlation between the Ottoman Empire and its success, and it's the rival of the Jews that came to the Ottoman Empire, right? You look at every single nation throughout history where there's a large concentration of Jews, and that nation is blessed. This country, the United States of America, okay, has the largest concentration of Jews outside of Israel today. Okay, America is blessed because of the people that are here. So what does it mean to be a blessing for the nations? So what that means is that we're supposed to be the individuals that inspire spiritual growth to the nations around us. To be or legoyim, a nation that brings light onto the nations. To be a mamlechet kohanim, a kingdom of priests, right? Means that we're inspiring the people around them. Of course, we're involved and engaged in the things that we're engaged in, our businesses, our families, our homes, community. But if there's no spiritual development in the system, you're missing out on what it means to be a Jew. The way we bring, the same way bees pollinate the plants, and that causes the fruits to grow, you and I are bees as well. We're here to pollinate spiritual growth. If you're listening to the Rabbi Dessler class in the morning, so Rabbi Dessler is talking about this idea of technology. He says all technology, okay, ultimately is used for selfish purposes, and therefore all technology is evil. It'll always be used for destruction. unless society turns the tides and recognizes that the purpose of life is to grow and give, it'll always be used for selfish purposes. When the plane came out, it was, we're going to solve world hunger. No one's going to go hungry anymore. We'll be able to fly food very quickly from place to place. But what is the plane used for in 1944? Used to drop the atom bomb. More people died with the technological advancement than anything else. As a matter of fact, he says, there's a man in the Chumash called Cain Tuval. Cain Tuval, or Tuval Cain. Tuval Cain was a someone who was ascribed to the construction of tools. He started the Bronze Age. And we say the Bronze Age brought new ways of killing people, but he only invented the bronze so you could have new shovels and tools to go ahead and till the earth. But all those things were ultimately used for what? Murder, swords and arrows, and all kinds of other things. Technology, if it's not harnessed by people that are growing morally and spiritually, it'll be used for horrible things. Okay, same is true with our generation today. All these new technological advancements sounds amazing, right? But if we don't have moral people wielding that power, it'll only be used by people who have self-serving needs. And this is why the mazalot are interesting, because they tell us a story on the one hand of where we're going, but on the other hand, it's a distraction, because you have the power of telling your own story. And that story, when you tell that story, you become like the moon and you're reflecting godliness in this world. Rabbeinu Bachya, these are all, by the way, if you notice, the people that we're quoting here are all Rishonim. These are all early rabbis from the 11th and 15th century, all rabbis from Spain, who were all very much aware of astrology, astronomy, and so on and so forth. And Rabbeinu Bachya says as follows, says, when the sages state that Israel is above the constellations, they do not mean that constellations have no influence on Jews. For we find it often mentioned in the Talmud, in the Midrash, that historiological fate brought this about, and that's why that person died. So whether or not Brian Thompson died today, right, was in the stars, it probably was in the stars. Could he have changed it? The answer is yes. Now, the challenge is like this. When I use my free will against your free will, why does my free will overcome yours? Meaning, if you're not supposed to die today, if Brian Thompson wasn't supposed to die today, in the stars he was supposed to live until a nice 85-year-old and go down to, walk his children down their wedding and hold his grandchildren. Why did this guy, we don't know who he is, we know he's a white male, hooded, who had a silencer, a gun in his hands, and came and shot this guy in cold blood in the morning. Targeted assassination, not an accident. Okay? How did that guy kill how did he kill Brian Thompson if Brian Thompson wasn't supposed to die? Well, if you say he's supposed to die, then that's not a question. But let's say if we read his horoscope, he says, no, he's supposed to live a long life. How does that work? Okay, this is the way it works. Every single time someone comes up to you and brings you harm, right, pulls out a gun, at that moment, instantaneously, there's a court case that opens up. And at that moment, we weigh out whether or not you have the merit to survive that attack. He did survive. Fatal. President Trump survives. Right? And by the way, I said this to you guys. Remember that? I said Donald Trump will win the presidency because there's no open miracle for him to lose. Right? Twice. Right? It doesn't make any sense. He's winning for a reason. There's a part he's got a particular. Therefore, even though he may not be a good guy and has lots of reasons to be killed, and maybe at that moment he actually was supposed to die, but because of the merit of the people that he is serving, he overcame that attack. Right? It's not his own merit. It's the merit of the people he's serving that he survived. This guy, unfortunately, for whatever reason, either it was the end of his life, that was when he was supposed to die, and this guy just ended up showing up at the right place at the right time, or he did not have the merit to withstand the attack. This is why it's so important for us. We say tzedakah tatzil mi mavet. Why does charity, protect you from death? Because if someone else is relying on my charity, I am no longer being judged at that moment with my own merit. I'm including the other person's needs with my merit. Right? The hack of life is being someone that's giving and creating a scenario where other people need you. Now, it's not just my merit, it's the merit of the people that I serve. So I chose to be a rabbi of a community. You all are now included in my merit. If something happens to me, you're impacted by it. If my classes are really good and it's inspiring you and you're growing from it now, I become a conduit for your growth. And when I'm going to be evaluated and judged, okay, your merit comes into play with my merit. And it's not just me standing alone anymore that's being judged. All of us together are standing together. You understand? Yes. So that is how we create a hack and break out of our mazal. It's not just me and my merit. It's what I do for my community, what I do for the people around me, my family, my friends, me giving and providing. I elevate myself to becoming something more. Okay, look at number 6. We're on page number 2. We have a long way to go. And I don't have a lot of time. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh bivaro. Amen. Okay. Why did God create the universe during the month of Nisan, whose sign is Aries? Because when God decided to create the universe, he told the master of darkness, the Satan, "Depart from me, for I wish to create the universe with light." The sheep, symbolized by Aries, is white in color, whereupon the master of darkness, whose sign is Taurus, the bull, who is black in color, asked that after the light, after the light, what will you create? And God answered, darkness, the sign of the month of Iyar, Taurus. And the conversation continues. After darkness, what will you create? Twins, Gemini. For the man is destined to see through both light and darkness. The Gemini is in the form of man. So you see an evolution. Sheep, bull, man. It's growing. Okay? Is destined to see through both the light and the darkness. And Gemini is the form of man. And afterwards, what do you create? The sign of the crab, the Cancer, for man. When he rises from the toil and reaps from it, will become strengthened like the lion. Then I will create the Virgo, because man will then be happy, like a virgin at her nuptials. After that, I will create the scales, a Libra, for then man's deeds will be measured as the scales. And after, I will create the Scorpion, right? For when man's deeds will be weighed, it will be discovered that he has also sinned, and he will have to descend to purgatory, whereupon I will create the bow, Sagittarius, for man will be surely plead for mercy, and he will then be sprung from punishment like the arrow from a bow. Then I will create the goat, the Capricorn. For then man ascends, and he will dart like the mountain goat. I will then create the Dipper, Aquarius, to pour upon him the cleansing water. Last, I will create the fish, the Pisces, to show that just as the evil eye has no effect on fish in the water, who are hidden from the sight, so too Israel rises above the mundane world, and neither star nor hour has absolute determination over it. There is a process here. Every month is telling a story of something much bigger, and it's unified. It's not just sectioned off. It's all interconnected. Look at number 7. Rabbi Bachya says, "Open your eyes and see the lessons of the signs of the signs of the Zodiac. They come to teach us that although the powers of the constellation are exceedingly great, and from the beginning of creation the influence governs the mundane world, there is a power beyond them, the power of the Holy One, blessed be He, who chose the month of the scale Libra to enact the day of judgment, when He decides the fate of the entire creation." Isn't it an accident that scales is in the month of Tishrei? Right? That's the month where you have literally Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as being in the balance. That's the day, not an accident. It's all interconnected. Number 8, the Zohar. Why was the Torah given to the Jewish people during the month of whose signs is twins, Gemini? Right? We know that it was given in the month of Sivan, in order that the nations of the world would not be able to claim, had you given the Torah to us, we would have accepted it. Now, the Holy One, blessed be He, says, I gave the Torah to the Jews during the month of Gemini, so that Esav, Yaakov's twin brother, would come forth and convert and sincerely repent of his evil deeds. There will come a time when he too will study Torah. We know that at the end, it says Yaakov and Esav divided the influences of the month between them. Yaakov took Nisan and Iyar, right? Aries and Taurus, and Esav took Tammuz and Av. What are the two? What do we do in the month of Tammuz and Av? We have Shivat B'Tammuz and we have Tisha B'Av. 2 of the saddest days in Jewish history. They belong to Esav. And we're going to reclaim them, Bezrat Hashem, in time. Okay? So, as we may observe, that during the 2 months, due to Israel's sinfulness, the prince of Esav, Rome, was strengthened and was able to visit retribution upon the Jewish people. As for Sivan, Gemini, those 2 brothers are partnered in influence, hence the sign of Gemini twins. Not an accident that the months themselves are telling you something more that's happening in the calendar. Look at number 9 in English. The first day of the week is called Sunday, like sun. The second day of the Monday is for the moon. The 7th day is called Saturday for Saturn. In French, Tuesday, Mardi, is named after Mars. Wednesday, Mercredi, excusez-moi, for Mercury. And Friday, for Vendredi, for Venus. So each day of the week is really a name that comes from the months themselves. You don't even realize it. Right? Whereas in Spanish, we see that Monday is Lunis, named after like the moon. Luna. Tuesday is Matras for Mars. Matras Wednesday is Miércoles, Mercury. And Mercado in Spanish. Friday is called Viredis, named for Venus. I don't know. I couldn't figure out where Thursday, what is it? Jueves is what? I know, but what is it connected to? I know, but I to find the land for it. What? Jupiter? Okay, could be. I don't know. I'm just, anyway. Me'orei Naim says there are 7 stars that were crowned as the leading stars that God gave to the powers and influence of the lower world. The stars are divided into 7 days of the week. The order being Sunday, the sun, Monday, the moon, Mars is for Tuesday, and Mercury for Wednesday, Jupiter is for Thursday, Venus is for Friday, Saturn is for Saturday. They have an effect on man from the beginning of time. Okay, very clear. That's a Jewish source. Talmud Shabbat. Each hour, right, one of the 7 planets rule and are influential to the world. They have been affecting the world since the day of their creation. Each planet has a particular influence, a sway on us. We don't see it because it's so ever subtle. Did you know that when you walk into a room, you change the nature of the room? When you walk into a room, because of your gravitational force, you come to the room, the walls around you bend towards you. It's measurable. When you walk into the room bends towards you, around you. You don't see it because it's so tiny, but we could measure it. The same is true with the moon and the earth. The moon and the earth have a very deep correlation. As a matter of fact, the moon's gravity impacts the water. The whole idea of the waves, the ocean, the tides are all connected to the moon. If there was no moon, they would have no tides. That's the moon creating and exerting influence on us. So it's measurable. Can you and I feel the influence of Mars on our planet? No, but it's happening. That's what he's saying, right? It's actually happening. All the planets have a little bit of a sway on us on some level.
So that's the energy that we feel from other people.
Correct. It's part of it. Also, is the energy. I would say more than that. You know, there's you're all familiar with the Wolfman legend. That when there's a full moon, so where does that come from? Right? It comes from the fact that when there's a full moon, when the moon is at its greatest peak, it influences all bodies of water on the planet. And since you are made up of like 80% water, your brain is made up of like 90% water, it influences you. There's a deep correlation. We have over 200 years of data that proves that during the full moon, more crimes happen during the months of a full moon. Right? The lunatic comes from the word luna, right? Right? There's an influence that the moon has on us. Okay, so he says as follows. He says that Me'or Anayim. He says, number 12, 4 of them have a favorable effect on the world. The sun, Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury have a positive effect. The other 3, Saturn, Mars, and the moon, have a bad effect and cause damage and harm. So if you know the moon and the setting, if you understand the constellations and what hour it is, you know that there is negative times and positive times during the day. Right? They dominate over the 3 primary foundations of the world. The foundation of the earth is Saturn, foundation of fire, Mars and water, and the moon. The Jewish people were given the commandment to override and protect themselves from these baleful powers and influences. Shabbat, Brit Milah, Rosh Chodesh. Shabbat protects us from the bad influence of Saturn, Brit Milah against Mars, Rosh Chodesh, Venus, and the moon. Therefore, the Greeks concluded that by enforcing a decree prohibiting the practice of these 3 mitzvot, Shabbat, Brit Milah, and Rosh Chodesh, it would remove their protection from bad influences of these planets, causing the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, to be destroyed. Meaning, even the Greeks, who were rationalists, understood that the constellations themselves have an impact on us. And since we are engaged in protecting ourselves from those influences, if we remove those practices, they will become conquerable like everyone else because they are being lowered down to the level of someone who is under the influence of the mazal. Me'or Naim continues. He says, Hashem commanded every Jew with 7 primary mitzvot to guard him from bad occurrences. The 7 mitzvot are Brit Milah, that protects against the evil effect of Mars, Tefillin of the head against Saturn, Tefillin of the arm opposite the heart, Venus, versus the moon, whereas four-fingered garments succeed against the remaining planets, Sun, Venus, Jupiter, and Mars. To neutralize the negative influence of the three stars, our sages have cautioned the Jewish world, I'm not sure what that says, woolen, to keep their three primary mitzvot given to them, not them. They are Nidah, Chala, and Shabbat candles. Ladies who keep the laws of Nidah are protected from the evil impact of Mars, which is a sign of blood and other terrible things. The Chala protects against the bad effects of the moon. For just as removing Chala is the beginning, the first act of dealing with dough, so the moon is the first star, the nearest planet to the earth. Lighting the Shabbat candle signifies the Saturn for Jewish women who are meticulous in lighting candles to honor Shabbat. Shabbat being the main mitzvah, are saved from the bad influence of Saturn. Another example, whereas the planets are influenced from the menorah, with the 7 branches, Midrash Parshat Terumah. The sun signifies the middle branch. The 3 branches on the right denotes the 3 stars, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars, and the 3 branches of the left for the remaining 3 stars. Thank you. Venus, Mercury, and Mercury are the stars that actually orbit the sun. And therefore, when you look at the menorah itself, it's also being divided up against the backdrop of the constellations as well. The Chumash says, "Your lamb shall be without blemish, a yearling male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats." What does he say over here? Number 16, Chazak Sofer says, the Jewish people left Egypt on Thursday. On the eve of Wednesday, the sun began to govern. Being the first planet on that day, the Jewish people begins the evening before. At midnight, Mars took over rulership. The effect of this planet is good for the nations. Remember that we said Mars when, when Paro looked out and he saw that the Jewish people leaving that night would only cause blood. They were leaving at a time where Mars was coming out, and that was blood. And therefore, they were supposed to die from their sins. So Moshe says to God, we can't take the Jewish people out at a time where they're going to die. Hashem says, don't worry about it. We're going to turn that blood of death into the blood of Brit Milah. Okay? And blood's going to come. Question is, going to be positive or negative? Number 17. Esav drew upon the influence of the red star Mars, for it was beneficial to him, but bad for the Jewish nation. For this reason, the Jewish nation distanced themselves from red clothing. By the way, is it an accident that Elon Musk wants to go back to Mars? You know, why does he want to go back there? What's the power of Mars? Isn't it interesting that that's the planet he wants to go to? Pharaoh saw that Mars would be under the influence of the sun at midnight and tried to convince the Jewish nation that it was not advisable for them to Jewish people to leave Egypt. Wednesday at midnight, even though Mars, the sign of blood, was ruling at that night, Hashem commanded the Jewish nation to smear blood on their doorposts in order for them to remove the superstition of the faith of the planets. On Thursday, when Jupiter, the star of riches for the nations, ruled, is when everything reversed. The Egyptian firstborns were killed, when the star that shows blood to the disadvantage of the Jewish nation. And the next day, in the hour of Jupiter, with the influence of the riches of the nations, the Jews received the riches of the Egyptians. For this reason, we are commanded to removing all leavened bread. Sun, Mars, Jupiter, removing from them their power, proving the Egyptians' steadfast belief in the planets was in vain. In view of this, it is said, Hashem took us out there with a strong hand. We broke nature. The whole story of the Jewish people leaving Mitzrayim was breaking the story, breaking the mold. The name of the Egyptian god was Ra. Who was Ra? Sun god. What is the sun? Time doesn't change. It's a steady beat, nothing changes. And everything about the story of the Jewish people leaving Mitzrayim is all about things can change. So when Shlomo Melech says, Shum chadash tachat hashemesh, what's he talking about? Nothing is new under the sun. He's referring to the people that allow themselves to be defined by time underneath the sun. But it's not true that things don't change, because we see they did change. The Jewish people broke all the rules of all the signs. The Chazak Sofer says that Rabbi Yossi said, I want my share to be with those who commence Shabbat in Tiberias, and those who escort the Shabbat out in Tzipori, being that Tiberias is in the valley, so Shabbat comes in early. The last hour before Shabbat comes, when Jupiter governs. Following that is the bad influence of star of Mars. Tzipori, situated on the mountain, ushers out Shabbat, late when Mercury rules. This star has the influence of success in Torah learning. Where we are on the geographical planet impacts you. You understand? Some people are more successful not because they deserve to be successful, it's because they're in the right place at the right time. As a matter of fact, we say the word mazal is an acronym for what three things? Makom, Zman, and Lashon. Being at the right place at the right time and saying the right thing are all three things that impact your mazal. Makom, Zman, and Lashon. Chavetz Chaim says in the Rashot, he says, sorry, we did that already. Chasam Sofer. Abarvanel, Sefer Daniel says, at the time of Aaron's birth, the stars Saturn and Jupiter were ruling under the zodiac sign of Pisces. These stars had the effect of redemption and enhancing wisdom and understanding in that generation. And therefore, Aaron was born under a sign that was very favorable for someone who was very intelligent. Okay? That was his nature. He was given the gift. Number 20, Chasam Sofer, comments on the words of the Barbanel. It is incorrect to say that these stars indicated the redemption of the Jewish people. The opposite is true, for even though Jupiter is indicated wise scholars like Moshe, Aaron, and their disciples, Saturn indicated their captivity and death. And this is when the slave labor in Egypt began. But God reversed the influence of these stars. The deathly influence of the stars, of the bad star, became the blood of the paschal sacrifice and circumcision. But the generation did not merit, and they died in the desert. The Sabbath is called after the planet Saturn, since it rules the beginning of this day. The effect of Saturn causes sadness, depression, and therefore the nations of the world did not choose this day as their day of rest. The Muslims chose Friday when the Venus ruled. This planet is the foundation of the fire, lust, which corresponds to the characteristics of the Muslim nation, who took out 9 out of 10 measures of harlotry that descended upon the world. Whereas the Christians chose Sunday as their day of rest, for the sun rules on the first hour of this day. The sun, being the central of the 7 planets, symbolizes the rulership of power. The Jewish nation has Shabbat, proving that even with the influences of unhappiness and the melancholy of Saturn, the Jewish nation can still celebrate and joy of this day, for the zodiac does not rule them. Do you understand that? Our Shabbat itself is a little finger up in the nation of the world, showing them that we are not defined by the mazalot. Now, it's interesting also, by the way, that Christianity and Islam both will tell you that they are an outgrowth of Judaism. They'll tell you that the Old Testament is true, that the Jewish people left Egypt and that Moses was the prophet, received the Torah. They'll tell you it's all 100% true, but something changed. Now, my question is, why didn't they choose Shabbat? Is it just because of the mazalot? I have a different theory. Ready? The Torah says that Shabbat, it will be ot beini u beinechem. It's a sign between me and you. Even the Muslims and the Christians didn't have the chutzpah to include themselves on that day, because they know that if a non-Jew keeps Shabbat, what happens? He gets a death penalty. So the Muslims chose a Shabbat on Friday. They can't put it on Saturday. And the Christians on Sunday, because the sign of Judaism is on Saturday. We never lost counting of the days. We know what day Shabbat is. Everyone knows what day Saturday is, the day of rest. It's been our story. But yet Christians and Muslims don't celebrate Shabbat on Shabbat because they can't. Even they knew it when they were starting their religions. It's for us. And because we have the power of breaking out of nature, they can't. They're too afraid of it. They're too afraid of letting go and letting God. And that's only your power. You have the power of letting go and letting God, not them. Last, we say, Ve'el shemot b'nei Yisrael habayim b'Mitzrayim et Yaakov ish ubeito ba'u. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each coming with his own household. Each one came with their unique mazal. Each one of the Shvatim represents a different month, a different sign on the Zodiac, a different story that is being told. And Bezrat Hashem, next week we're going to go into each one. Each month has a tribe that is associated with it. It will explain why, what their power is. We'll go through what fortune lies with each month, what are the challenges and what are the strengths of that month. And the idea isn't for me to share this information with you so you can ignore your own personal development. Feels, it's not fair, I got a bad mazal, right? Or I'm stuck. The opposite. I'm going to empower you to recognize 2 things. One is that your mazal means nothing. It tells me a little bit about which direction I'm pointed towards. But you can pull yourselves out of that mazal. Don't allow yourselves to become corrupted by the idea that you're stuck. This is an anti-Jewish concept. The people that were stuck were the Jews that left Egypt. I can't change. We're still living in that mentality of Mitzrayim, Metzer, that narrowness of the mind. The constriction of the mind. That's what slave mentality was. They all died in the desert. They couldn't get out of it. They could not believe that things ever changed. They were so locked into the caste system of Egypt, they couldn't break out of it. And there's a story that is being told here as well. In the last 20 years, you have all kinds of groups claiming victimhood and all kinds of horrible ideas that they can never change and their nature is stuck. It's nonsense. Every person has the power of changing. But to change requires a tremendous amount of effort. There's something called escape velocity, the energy that you need to break out of your mazal. Okay, what does that look like? In order for a rocket to break out of the Earth's gravity, you need escape velocity. You measure the velocity of the gravity pushing down on us, and so therefore I need a certain amount of energy to break out of that. What happens when a rocket breaks out of the Earth's atmosphere? It could go anywhere. Do you know that 90% of the fuel, the big rockets, are only there because you need the fuel to get out? It's all used. But once it's out, that amount of fuel can get you to Mars and back. Right? So it's all there. What energy are we taking into our own lives that allow us to grow and develop ourselves? I want this class to be a class about understanding the mazalot, but I also want it to be something that allows you to think more deeply about where you want to go with your mazalot, because you can break out of it. Have a great week. Bezrat Hashem, we'll continue the conversation next week. Any questions?